Fantastic. Thank you so much, Olivia, for the introduction, and welcome everybody. Thank you for making this the best choice of the day. Hopefully you won't regret this later on. We're going to be talking about volunteering. Rather bold. Freya and I have called this making it work. What we're hoping to do more modestly is to talk a little bit about our experiences in making it work at the Ripon Museums. That's where we're going to be talking about today. Um, uh, I, we're going to play tag in terms of talking. I'm going to start off, and then Freya is going to pick up from me. Um, did you want to say anything by way of introduction, Freya, before we kick off?
No, Olivia's introduction was really spot on. It's really nice for everyone to be here.
It's so good to see you all. And we're going to be having some discussions later on. A workshop is, as in the name implies, doing some work together. We're going to be breaking out into breakout groups towards the latter part, but we're also going to be using whiteboards within Zoom for your comments, for everybody to have an opportunity to crowdsource some thoughts around inclusive volunteering. So I have been involved with the Ripon Museums for a number of years. I've been on the board at the Ripon Museums. That's really why I saw the value in undertaking this project. We have done some research to try to develop the evidence base for inclusive volunteering. I'm very grateful to be invited to speak tomorrow with my colleague Beth about that research and about some ongoing work that we're doing at the moment. So I'm not going to speak too much about that now. I'm going to speak a little bit about the guide that we've developed and hand over to Freya to talk about the experiences at Ripon Museums. And we've also got a short video to hear from two of our volunteers as well. So starting off with what we already know, the volunteers are really important in the sector, make a real difference to museums, voluntary sector as a whole, of course. It's important for volunteers' own mental well-being and for making social connections. Many other positive outcomes come from volunteering. But volunteering is not an option for everybody. Some people may find it more difficult because of low confidence, stigma, mental health problems, physical disabilities, or a lack of workplace experience. So we've been working together, University and Ripon Museum Trust, to develop the evidence base around inclusive volunteering. And what we're trying to do with this piece of work is to make some suggestions, some ideas around good practice, and supporting other organisations to enhance and develop their own inclusive volunteering. So very briefly about the work that we've done, just to kind of highlight the evidence creation process before we look at the guide that we produced. We conducted a study together to explore how and why inclusive volunteering works and to develop the guide that we'll discuss shortly, to explore outcomes for people receiving inclusive volunteering, to help build the evidence base for it, and also for the organisation. So the benefits accrue to both individuals and the organisation, as we're going to be talking about. And also thirdly, as has already been mentioned this morning, around costs, that nothing is free. So it requires an investment, but also considering what are the economic consequences of that investment in inclusive volunteering as well. We undertook some research activities in terms of interviews and diaries, observations, to really understand how inclusive volunteering works at the museums. And this is my colleague Beth undertook a lot of this field work with volunteers to really understand what it took to volunteer, but also with staff members in terms of supporting those who required some additional support to volunteer. As I mentioned, I'm going to speak a bit more tomorrow about some of the findings from the research. But one of the elements was around the creation of a theory of change. So this is unlocking the key to the black box. It's kind of looking inside a complex intervention to understand how it works. And these are partly some of the outcomes of the thematic analysis of the qualitative data that we collected. Also, it's partly the brainstorming of our advisory group, which was formed of both people with lived experience and volunteers and experts in the field. And you can see it's quite a mess, even though it's a colourful mess. This was put together into something which kind of made much more sense, which formed the bedrock of the guide. So I'm flagging up a QR code in a minute to the guide, and with the background blurring out, you can't really see it. But anyway, it'll be up on another slide in just a second. You can get the PDF of it, you can download and print it. But I wanted to talk through some of these elements of the theory of change, because for us, what's important is the multi-level nature of this, that it applies to both individuals and to organizations. So on the left-hand side, the purple box, the key elements of inclusive volunteering, there's a strong requirement for the organization as a whole to embrace it, to consider its structure, its procedures, so that it's threaded throughout everything that it does. One of the things that we were very clear about, and which really came out from the research, was that through the process of supporting people to volunteer, you shouldn't be making them stand out, as it were, as requiring extra support. It needs to be embedded into what the organization does. So it's about reframing it as everyone who's a volunteer at some time requires some additional support. It's about building that into referral processes. And in terms of assessment at the beginning, it's like making support plans for all of the volunteers. It's embedding it into what it's done routinely, and not just for those who may have a diagnosed mental health problem, may have a physical disability, or neurodiversity may be an issue for them. So inclusive volunteering needs to become central to what the organization as a whole believes in and is doing, part of its culture, really, and values. And that requires leadership. So what we saw at the Ripon Museums was that sense of shared purpose and vision around providing support for volunteers right the way through the workforce, from those who needed kind of more of a one-to-one support to those who might just need, as everyone does, a friendly voice and a friendly chat every now and again. That requires some sort of framework in terms of support. So this may already be in existence in terms of supporting volunteers more generally, but then it's about extending that into those areas of support, or areas where the organization may need more kind of training and thought around in terms of providing support to individuals. So the training support plan is also around staff and those who are providing the support to the volunteers. It's thinking about that. So there's a whole set of processes for the organization. And then in working with individuals, it's very much about the person-centered approach, taking the person who's coming in to give their time for the organization and respecting that, and really understanding what they want to do, what they want to give, but also what they require, what support they may require to enable them to give back to the organization. And that requires some trust with the member of staff or the person who's undertaking that initial work, really good communication. Person feels listened to, accepted. They feel reassured that they're obtaining that support, advice, and guidance that they need. There is a sense of a one-to-one relationship and one-to-one support there. Sometimes that could be through buddying, it could be through support in a group context, or it could be through a one-to-one. But it's also about setting individual goals for that individual, which are manageable, realistic, and achievable for them. So that's an introduction to some of the key elements of inclusive volunteering that we found. The green bit in the middle, how it fosters change, is really the mechanisms around how providing inclusive volunteering leads to improved outcomes. And these are mainly around individual level outcomes, certainly around providing a structure and routine for people who may not have had that previously, developing new skills and knowledge, carrying out meaningful roles, enjoying it, feeling committed to something, undertaking that, connecting with a diverse range of people, and responding also to changing needs. Now, this applies to all volunteers, and this again is part of how inclusive volunteering is part of volunteering as a whole. It's not as if it's something separate and special, it's something which is what organizations do. And that leads to the outcomes on the right-hand side, individual and for the organization. Under individual, positive relationships, building of relationships, a sense of community, feeling part of something bigger than themselves, reduced social isolation and loneliness as well, and a sense of self-growth in terms of increased confidence, self-esteem, and well-being, and also a sense of purpose and identity, learning skills, obtaining structure, and even gaining employment or training for some people. For the organization, it has a benefit in terms of increasing the diversity of the volunteer workforce, raising the profile of the organization, and even a leverage for additional funding where this is important for volunteering outcomes as well. Of course, it's bringing a diversity of skills and knowledge into the organization as well, as we know that volunteers are essential to the running of many voluntary sector organizations. The elements along the bottom, the enabling factors and barriers, are those elements that support the process but also may get in the way and frustrate some of the processes. Things that need to be kind of troubleshot, that's not the right way of saying it, sorted out basically, and dealt with. Some of these things may be an issue and others may not be, but also there may be things that are not listed here that may flag up as potential issues that need resolving. So here, this mentions, for example, leadership and management style, making sure that that's reflective of inclusive volunteering, that the values are embedded within it. Volunteers are involved in management roles and decision making, and the volunteer roles match skills and needs available within the organization. Sometimes organizational resources and the capacity to do this is a real issue to provide that additional support and consideration for some people. And also individual factors such as well-being, socioeconomic, community factors may also frustrate some of these processes. So that's a bit of an overview in terms of an introduction to the guide. You can download it using the QR code here. These slides will be sent out as part of the digital tote bag afterwards, so you can come back to this and click on the link as well as using the QR code there. Or if you're not quick on the draw, just Google the title and Google us at the Mental Health Social Care Research Centre, and you can download your own copy of the guide. We've used that theory of change to basically structure the different elements of the guide, and we've used examples and case studies from the work at the Ripon Museums. It's designed to be an interactive guide where you can basically click on elements that you want to look at, and it's not that long. It's only about 16, 20 pages or so. So hopefully that will be of some assistance to you. So I'm now going to hand over to Freya to talk much more around Ripon Museums and inclusive volunteering there.
Fab, thank you, Martin. So I'm just going to kind of talk about it more through our organisational perspective. So kind of linking in with the theory of change that Martin's just explained, but kind of in like more practical terms for us as an organisation. So this project started several years ago out of a desire to be more inclusive and accessible as an organisation. RMT was founded over 40 years ago by a group of committed volunteers, and so it's really important that we remain as open and welcoming to volunteers as possible. But inclusive volunteering also speaks to our vision and mission, which is to inspire people to seek a fairer society. We're made up of 3 museums, so that's a workhouse museum, a prison and police museum, and a courthouse museum. And so the stories that we tell are about justice and injustice, they're about inequalities in society, and they're about marginalised and alienated groups of people. So as we're working with these topics, we really, as an organisation, try and increase our awareness of kind of these issues today. And naturally, that looks at holding the mirror up, looking internally and being aware of inequalities within our sector and the barriers that people face in accessing it. Historically, there are countless reasons why people are alienated from the heritage sector. And so through our inclusive volunteering programme, we want to address and tackle those barriers and open up our museums for everyone. So this looks like working with volunteers who historically have been alienated from working with us, whether that's due to disability, poor mental health, social isolation, lack of economic resource, and making sure that we're a place for them. And obviously that is ongoing, like we're not perfect, but we're on our way there. And that means that we are committed to prioritising organisational resource into improving accessibility and inclusion. If you go to the next slide, please, Martin. Fab. So naturally, a volunteering programme which aims at working with new people means organisational changes and new ways of working. So as Martin highlighted, the most important principle is that person-centred approach. That's understanding the skills and support needs of an individual and creating a volunteer experience which works for them. So our volunteers they're all unique, and they are all from different backgrounds, they have different needs, but they also have different skills and passions. And it is impossible to fit all of these people into one kind of dogmatic volunteering role. So we've tried to work, or way of working or way of learning. We've tried to kind of move away from that very static volunteer role that people have to fit into and make it work more for them as individuals. So instead, it's really important for us to look structurally at building in flexibility into our roles and our onboarding and induction processes, and building a broader culture of support and a team that embraces and values diversity more generally in the organisation. And this goes all the way back to, how we're recruiting our volunteers. So, yeah, we advertise in the normal places, like on our website and through local volunteering platforms. But we also work closely with local partners, and they're from places like the health and social care sector, education sector, organisations supporting people to find work experience and opportunities. So that looks like the YMCA, inpatient mental health units, social prescribers, mental health support organisations and charities, schools, that kind of thing. And they refer people in, and that can be for unique volunteering roles. It could be for short or long-term placements, depending on the needs of that person. Our onboarding and induction process, again, is prioritising that person-centred approach. So everyone meets with the volunteer manager, and that's regardless of whether they've come through a referring stream, whether they've applied, whether they're kind of self-identifying as having additional support needs that they've disclosed. Everyone meets with that volunteer manager, and they talk through what they want to get out of volunteering. What skills they have, what skills they want to develop, and what support needs they might have. And together we build that induction plan and that volunteering plan, as Martin described. We emphasise in that discussion what support is in place, what adjustments we can make, and the systems of communications with staff. So if something's going wrong, you can highlight it. If something's, we can navigate it together. It's not a static or permanent thing. And we discussed that inclusive volunteer scheme with everyone, regardless of if they identify as having additional support needs or not. And that's really an important part of the process for us, fronting everyone's volunteer experience with this, because it emphasises the culture that we want to foster. It says straight away, you're going to be working alongside people with additional support needs. That's how our team works and thrives. But it also says to individuals, even if that's you're not coming through a referring avenue, you can access that support too at any time. Things change, and that flexibility is there for you as well. That then in turn, as Martin described, helps to make the programme invisible within the organisation. So what bad looks like for us is having volunteers who feel marginalised or othered from the rest of the volunteer cohort, like two kind of separate cohorts working alongside, and that there's a group that feel that they have limitations put on them that other people don't. And we want everyone to feel part of the same team and that they have the same experience. So obviously, as an organisation, we have to make changes and upskill in order to make a programme like this work, to facilitate that flexibility needed to support our volunteers. And that looks like kind of cultural changes, identifying training needs for staff and volunteers, working with staff members to adapt roles and spaces for new volunteering roles, creating an internal comms strategy which champions principles of access inclusion. But it also means analysing and adjusting elements of strategy and governance to ensure that the programme is supported from the top down and ultimately is increasingly interwoven into our DNA as an organisation. So this looks like things like changing volunteering KPIs and reporting expectations at a board level. Internally, I really try and break away from, the only success measure and growth measure being volunteer hours, and that emphasis on kind of the monetary value of that time spent and the equivalent of it. Instead, we try to build narratives and reporting around things like people going into paid employment off the back of volunteering, diverse attendance at our socials, making sure the full community is represented there, talking through personal testimonies and reporting on the health of our relationships with partners. So it's emphasising the personal and the cultural impacts when we're reporting, rather than just the economic, which diminishes kind of the relationship we have with our volunteers into something transactional. And we want to avoid that. We've also adapted the structure of the programme as we've gone along and learned. So initially, the programme was it employed one member of staff, a volunteer support officer, and it was their role to kind of provide that one-on-one support. Now that role has been kind of consumed into the volunteer manager's responsibilities, and they sit on the senior management of the senior staff team. So that means that the aims and values of the programme now sit at that management level. And then the expectation is that each staff member is to make the roles that they look after as inclusive and accessible as possible, that it's everyone's responsibility across the organisation rather than that individual staff members to kind of make it work, which kind of was leading to kind of pockets of work and isolation. This is kind of much more, we've got a shared aim and vision by working this way. And then we've also reworked our business strategy and audience development plan to make sure that kind of these principles of access, inclusion and participation don't sit separately from like our economic targets and our visitor engagement targets, which historically they used to kind of like two competing parts of the business where like you spend money on this and you make money doing this. We want these two halves of our business to inform each other. So we take learnings from working with our supported volunteers and we feed those into our visitor development plans. So this means visitor experience is kind of continually developing its accessibility, but ultimately that means that it has a broader reach in audience, so is more economically viable. So just, as I said, I'm talking through this from a very organisational perspective. I don't like to speak for my volunteers. I've got a video in a minute where two of them are going to talk through their experience. But kind of, as Martin hinted at, the sort of like really frequent outcomes that we see that are lovely to see, are people, we can see that they're growing in confidence in themselves and in their role, and people going on to paid employment or to further education opportunities, and people building relationships with other volunteers and kind of being embedded within that community, and people embracing new opportunities in their wider life and then within our organisation. So we have lots of in supported volunteers that go on to join our theatre group, which most of them would not have done when they first started because of lack of confidence. So that's really lovely to see. But as an organisation, we've also reaped the benefits of having a diverse cohort. So they bring, that diversity of ideas, those new ways of working. But importantly, by focusing on embedding supported volunteering, it's led to an overall kind of more cohesive volunteer cohort. that the organisation benefits from. Kind of by building that culture that prioritises access and prioritises the needs of kind of the individual and that person-centred approach. We've seen a general approval rating in our volunteer questionnaires go up in recent years. Then again, having such a diverse group of people working with us consistently and not just kind of in short-term pocket projects and building kind of that culture, it's improved our confidence in delivery and what we feel we can offer the public. So this summer, it looks like us developing workshops for SEND families and developing our visitor resources after speaking to our volunteers and their experience of being in other organisations, being in our spaces, and we're able to work with people closely who they understand our aims, they understand our resources better, but then they also have that lived experience and perspective. And that's a really valuable resource for someone who kind of looks after the visitor experience as well. And it's a really valuable way of working. And then perhaps the most surprising outcome with inclusive volunteering is that once it's embedded, it's really improved our economic resilience as an organisation. We know that in the charity sector, one of the biggest threats is that volunteer recruitment at the moment, after COVID, in the cost of living crisis, that reliable stream of volunteers, of recent retirees, is not so reliable anymore. But the programme like this has allowed us to tap into that unseen community resource, a group of people who historically couldn't have accessed volunteering opportunities with us. But this has allowed us, therefore, to maintain and actually increase our volunteer numbers despite kind of this broader national adversity in the sector. Those numbers are absolutely imperative because our volunteers are key to our operation. I couldn't open the doors without them. So it's kind of worth noting that, supported volunteers, it takes time to induct them, it takes resource, it takes money and funding, but those people are often, like from my anecdotal experience, the people that spend the most time volunteering with us, that are coming in for the most shifts, that are putting their hands up to do extra. So when it works and when it's embedded, kind of the value you get out of it is tenfold. So that's kind of from the organisational perspective. We've got a video of two of our volunteers, Sharon and Tom, who are just going to speak about it from their perspective and a little bit of like what it's like to be a volunteer with us.
Hello, my name is Sharon Heaton and I volunteer at the Workhouse Museum, and that's front of house, and I also volunteer at the P&P front of house as well. So I've been volunteering nearly 3 years now. So when I first started, my confidence, and I had the choice because there's so many different positions. So just try and give the front desk a go, and I'll never be able to do it. And now I'm actually training people up as well now. And I never thought I'd ever be proud of myself, and I am, and that's taken a long time to feel like that. So it's been amazing for me. It just makes me feel great about myself because, like I say, it's taken a long time to feel like that, and just getting to talk to people because I have some meet all sorts of different people, so I always have a right good chat with some people, you have a laugh with some people, so it's different every time I come in, so Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I say, my second family. So, absolutely, been very supportive because I've been through quite a lot. So, and all of you have been there for me all the time, so thank you.
My name's Tom, and I volunteer on the front desk at the courthouse. I do Thursdays, every other Monday, and every other Friday. Well, I love history. I like meeting people. I like talking about history with the people that come in. I like sort of structure, like being part of a team, and I just really love history. That's my real passion. So I really like talking to people about history. It's a sense of purpose, gives you like structure, something to do, something to get up for. Yeah, I find it really rewarding, and getting like sort of good feedback from sort of people coming in saying they've enjoyed the visit. I love history, so if people say they've learned something or they want to kind of look, they've got interested in a certain subject, I find that really like rewarding. Yeah, no, I really like volunteering here. I've volunteered at quite a lot of different places. I've always found kind of like the volunteers are quite sort of, you know, quite important, quite valued here. The support's really good. Having like a duty manager that I can always phone if I need sort of help with anything. We have like supported volunteering, which is really good. You can kind of like check in. We have meetings with volunteers, which is good because kind of you work on your own here at the courthouse, so it's good to like meet some of the other people because you don't always get a chance to talk to them. No, it's a really sort of friendly organisation, and we have like a newsletter, a mailing sort of letter, which sort of keeps us informed, like with all the different events and stuff and what's happening. As well as meetings and stuff. So yeah, no, it's a really good place to work. I've been here nearly 4 years now, which is the longest I've ever volunteered in one place. And that's because I genuinely like it here.
Hello, my name is Sharon.
Okay, thank you so much for the comments and questions and the chat in the chat. We will come back to some of that at the end, but we got some questions for you. And some of this has been talked about already, but it'll be a good opportunity for us to share some thoughts together. I'm just going to share a whiteboard so you can contribute your own thoughts to it. And we've got these two questions that we'd like you to focus on. First of all, what are you already doing to make volunteering more inclusive within your organizations? I can see some answers to that question already in the chat. And what can you develop to make volunteering even more inclusive? Think about this from the perspective of your own organization. And anybody can contribute if you like. If you haven't used this before, on the left-hand side, you can see a little menu bar and there's a sticky note. And all you need to do, click and drag a sticky note on there and write something interesting. There you go. So have a think. These two questions, pop a little post-it note close to the question that you want to respond to, and think about a little comment in response to these questions that you'd like to share with everyone else. Has everyone got access to it?
Folks, are you able to access the whiteboard? Is anyone struggling?
It says view only.
It says it's view only.
Okay.
Is it? Let's see what's view.
Meeting collaborators. Ah, right. I'll change that to editor. Let's see if that works.
That looks better.
Right. Okay. Good. In thinking about the second question, think about what you can develop that you haven't got already. Think about new things to make it even more inclusive. What you're doing already is on the left-hand side. I'm not going to read these out. You can read them and explore them together. Going to allow one more minute for this. And I'll then introduce 2 more questions for you to discuss in small groups. Lots of great things coming up here. I'm loving the colour. I'm loving the linkages that are being made between this. Be as creative as you like. And it's also great to see partners in our current study are also in the room as well. Okay, so next I want us to think a little bit more about how would make volunteering more inclusive. So becoming more inclusive in volunteering, how would that bring new opportunities to your organization? And secondly, what barriers need to be overcome in order to achieve this? So I'll just pop those 2 questions on the board. I'm going to close down this whiteboard for the moment. And you're going to, if you could just make a note of these 2 questions, you're going to be going straight into small groups to discuss this. So first of all, how would making volunteering more inclusive, a bit of a mouthful, bring new opportunities to your organization? So what are the opportunities of doing this? And secondly, what are the barriers? What barriers need to be overcome in order to achieve this? And Olivia is going to pop you all into little groups. We will
Brilliant.
not, unfortunately, have very much time left before we need to go back afterwards, but let's just have one very, very quick comment from each of the breakout rooms. If you can remember your number, room 1, have you got one thing which you can feed back?
We were just talking right at the end of the conversation about how to start these discussions. So we did look at opportunities, we did look at the barriers to overcome, and then we kind of got stuck in this cycle of saying, oh, it's just all a bit chicken and egg, don't know where to begin to unpick this. And then we were talking actually about little changes that maybe you can start with. So maybe starting with making a space look more welcoming, and then take that as your jumping off point. So thinking about images that you're using, thinking about ways in which you are inviting people to be in that space as a starting point. So that was where we ended up.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that. Room 2, one thing you'd like to share?
I think that was us. So we were talking largely about how the opportunities are to better serve our audiences. So especially if you're working with a more diverse group of volunteers, and then people see those volunteers within your spaces, then that helps encourage more people from maybe who look the same way or have similar communities, that it encourages them to actually come through your doors in the first place. So actually, by investing in inclusive volunteering, it's investing in your audience as a whole, and not just
absolutely
the volunteer program.
Great, thank you so much. Room 3. Anybody in room 3?
Be brave.
I can't remember what room we were in.
Go for it.
Okay. We were talking about the concept of social justice, and about how this type of volunteering is us putting our money where our mouth is and showing that we're inclusive and open. The museums are open to absolutely everyone. But we also did talk about the barriers, and in lots of the time those it's perceived barriers from staff and ways in which we can try and break break that down to show that it is accessible for everyone and including accessible for the staff, this concept.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Room 4 or 5?
I think I was in room 4.
Okay, go for it, Chloe.
So we were talking about work that a couple of us have already been doing about with like a work placement kind of route to make volunteering more inclusive, about how it brings in more opportunities by making your actual museum or cultural service more representative of the community, because you're actually working directly with different community people within the local area, and about using the feedback from these placements to actually really improve upon your program as you go along, so that you're embedding their voices in your program.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Room 5? Anybody in room 5? Madeline?
I might have been in room 5. We were talking, we'd had some similar experiences, perhaps like with work placements through colleges and training providers. We also spoke about barriers again, the kind of like perceived barriers from the staff work, kind of bringing staff on board, and just capacity really in terms of staffing to support it. That was seen as a barrier. And then we kind of moved on to discussing how it had been embedded in the examples that you were given, that embedding it across the whole organisation being a way forward to overcoming those barriers.
Great, thank you so much. Any final points from room 6?
I think we jumped in at room 3.
Oh, okay, no worries. Final word to Freya. There's some questions that came up in the chat. Did you want to just pick one of those, Freya, before we get chucked out of this room?
Yeah, well, a lot of people were talking about resourcing, as Madeline was just doing, and that kind of staff capacity and that being a huge barrier, which like I absolutely recognised when I started the job. There was probably about 50% that were kind of had that buy-in, and then 50% that were like, no, this isn't my job. Like, and that was like a real struggle. It put more pressure on me. Like, didn't lead to kind of, great placements, limited people's experience. So like, I absolutely hear you. I think from my perspective, it's about kind of chipping away with the resources you have. Like, these things don't come overnight. Like, I have over 20 supported volunteers, but that wasn't day one. That's over years and years of investing and kind of making cultural changes. So with that kind of like that staff resistance, that is that longer term picture, in that, now when we're recruiting new staff, like, I make sure that I'm asking questions, that I'm kind of like saying straight up, like, look, this is how volunteering works here. What's your experience with that? So that I know I'm recruiting people that are on the same page, that kind of like from the off, they know that's how they're going to be working and that they're invested in that. And then I think it's about kind of like smartly using the resources you have, because someone put in the comments that, like, that's really hard for an operational team. That's exactly what I run. So like, most of my volunteers are operational. They're running the front of house. I've 2 paid front of house members across 3 museums. So I absolutely hear you. Again, it was kind of about like those staff understanding that kind of training is part of their roles, and kind of using the volunteer resources that we already have to kind of doing like those buddy systems to, it looked like taking things way back, thinking outside the box and being a bit creative, like writing people individual scripts and sitting down, doing a workshop with them for an hour, writing that out with them, so then they can kind of build and pick up the process. So there's not one way to kind of like crack it and use those resources. It just means like being quite creative with what you've got and who you've got. But once it kind of works, like that, is a couple of months of work realistically, but then people are off, and now it's like Sharon, who was in the video we presented, and Tom, like, they're some of my best trainers. Like, they understand kind of the principles as well. So it does pick up and roll once you start investing in it.
Right. Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending. I think it's back to having a quick break before the next workshop. Thank you so much.